You're listening to Seminary Dropout, and I'm your host, Shane Blackshear. In cooperation with MissioAlliance.org, straight from my house in Austin, Texas to yours, interviews with leading Christian authors, leaders, and thinkers, because good theology should be for everyone. This is Seminary Dropout. Let's go. My guest is Ann Voskamp. Ann is a wife of one fine, down-to-earth farmer. She's a book-reading mama to a posse of 7, and the author of the 60-week New York Times bestseller, 1,000 Gifts, which has sold more than 1 million copies and has been translated into more than 18 languages. Ann, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege and pleasure to be here.
So the new book is called The Broken Way, A Daring Path into the Abundant Life.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason you would remember this, but a few years ago, I had sent you an interview request, and you very kindly responded back, and I was doing all my interviews through Skype back then, and
I still can't do Skype on the farm, you know that?
Right, yeah. And that's what you said. You very kindly said, hey, we're out here in the middle of a farm, and
True.
So
Actually, I lost an interview today that I was supposed to do because I can't do Skype.
So, it's funny because I'm here in Austin, Texas, which is like the land of urban farms. So, when we say a farm, it's like in somebody's backyard and there's like a coffee shop next door. Yours is obviously a lot different. Yours is a real farm. Could you describe it to me?
We live in Ontario, Canada. We farm 800 acres, corn, soybeans, and wheat in rotation. We have 650 sows out there in the barn, so there's 1,000 baby piglets out there all the time. And I think the closest coffee shop I would have to... Well, actually, we have 3 Tim Hortons in our little town of only 5,000 people. So
okay, all right.
There are coffee shops, but I would have to haul into town for them.
Did you grow up there? Yeah,
I grew up on a farm about 15 minutes south of here. My husband grew up on another farm about 10 minutes from here. We were both born in the same hospital that our kids were born in,
wow.
And we were both delivered by the same doctor. So I'm born, raised, and probably will die in the same place.
I would imagine that is, a great asset. And then sometimes, like when people want to interview you, it's kind of a hassle sometimes maybe, but to be...
No, it's a beautiful thing to be rooted in one place, to have history and a place to head into town and people say, hey, you're a Voskamp. Are you related to... My husband is the youngest of 9 kids, so usually when you run into town, somebody somewhere went to high school with one of his siblings. So it's a good thing to have stability and rootedness in one place.
And I can imagine too, as a writer, that might be a place with maybe less distractions than city life.
It's true, Shane. It is. I feel like I'm on the backside of the wilderness, that God has me on the backside of the wilderness. And it's good to be in a place that really doesn't have the kind of noise, not just literal noise, but sort of soul noise. It's good to be in a place that's quiet and lets you breathe and be still in ways that maybe other geographical locations might not loan themselves to.
Yeah, it's got to be a real source of inspiration.
Mm-hmm. It is. It is living close. I love living. I think if we're gonna write and have anything to offer people, we have to live close to the ground with dirt underneath our fingernails, humble places. And I think this is a good place to be close to the earth and keep our eyes in the sky. We can live completely dependent on what God sends as weather, whether rain comes or sun comes. It keeps us living very open-handedly.
So I want to start talking about the book a little bit. You tell, towards the beginning of the book, first half of the book, you tell this great little story about one of your daughters taping a paper heart to her shirt.
Yeah.
And I really felt like that was just a beautiful metaphor for, what the book was about.
Yeah. Shalom came to me, and she had this paper heart, and she wanted me to tape it to her right on her chest, and I had this how I go ahead and lecture the kids in the morning and telling them how we all have to be kind and loving and caring towards each other. And I had thought she wanted to tape this heart to herself to remind herself to be loving and kind. And so as I was taping this heart to her, she had said, I need this heart to remember that God's love is around us everywhere, Mama. Oh, yes, that means so much more than my trite little lecture. And to realize, that we're living in His presence, His grace, His abundance all around us, this rain of grace. And my 1,000 Gifts is about counting all the ways that He loves us, that we live surrounded by His love. And as she's pressing on this piece of Scotch tape at the top of the heart, heart does what hearts do. It rips and tears down the center, a broken heart. And I thought, oh dear, the tears are going to come now.
Yeah.
And she looked up at me and she smiled and she cupped my face in her hands and said, it's okay, Mama. I think, Mama, where it's broken right here, it makes it easier for the light and the love to get in. And I think that's what the broken way is about, is realizing that, what do you do? I think we're all carrying around our own unspoken broken. We all have deep pain in our life that it'd be hard for us to lay out on the table maybe and articulate to people. But behind closed doors, we know that unspoken broken. And how do we live with our broken heart? And can we get to the place of realizing that the broken places are the places that the light gets in? Can we realize that maybe what we're supposed to do with our broken hearts seems so paradoxical, but give our broken hearts away? Can we live broken and given as the world and realize that maybe the most powerful thing we can lay down on the table is our own brokenness, and create a safe space for other people to bring their brokenness to the table? And that brokenness creates communion, which is a kind of healing and a kind of abundance of its own feast.
Part of your story is that you had a younger sister who was killed in an accident.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I have to think that must have been really formative for you, and really, I wonder if that affected your agency about yourself and just the way you were in the world.
I think so, Shane. I think I know it's the first memory I have is my sister being killed in our farm laneway. She was run over by a truck in front of my mother and I. I was 4 years old. My sister was 18 months old. I think I tell that story at the beginning of The Broken Way. Fears formed me. The world obviously was a terrifying place if your sister's skull could be crushed in front of you. And I think The Broken Way, if 1,000 Gifts opens with the scene of Amy being killed in front of Mom and I, and you're right, profoundly formative. The Broken Way opens with me speaking of my teenage years, cutting myself. I didn't really know how to cope with deep pain and the fear of living in such a world where at any moment you could lose someone you love in a very violent way. Throughout my teenage years, my mother was hospitalized in psychiatric wards, also trying to cope with this horrific incident that we had both witnessed, and losing someone we loved in such an unforgettable way. And I think as a church, we don't know how to deal with people who are broken. In that opening chapter, I talk about being in a church service when I was 18 years old, and the pastor laughing that at one point he and his family had lived next to a loony bin, and the rest of the congregation laughing. And the deep pain and humiliation and shame I didn't feel in that moment. But if the church isn't a safe place for broken people, if the church isn't a safe place for suffering people to come with their brokenness, the church isn't for Christ. Christ is with the suffering and the broken, for those who are desperate for healing. So I think The Broken Way is about how do we live fearless, completely fearless of brokenness. How do we live not afraid of our own personal brokenness and not afraid of brokenness in the world? I think as a culture, society, even as a church, we're desperate to escape suffering, to deny suffering, to turn away from pain, to bury pain, to numb it. We don't know how to sit with brokenness, or in many ways, I think we miss out on deep communion with Christ because we will not participate in the sufferings of Christ in the world.
I think of most kids who are sheltered from some really horrible facts of life sometimes, and then when we get older, there's kind of this sentiment of like, oh wow, nobody told me that there are some really dark things that go on in the world. And it seems like having that experience at such a young age, I mean, it seems as though you're the perfect person to write this book about brokenness and how God works in those ways.
I think, when we do it, I think it doesn't really matter what our age is. Eventually, you're right, Shane, we're going to the brokenness finds us. Sometimes it can find us in a heartbeat, in a snap of the fingers. A day we wake up and life is quote unquote normal, and then all of a sudden it's so shattered in ways that we would, our worst nightmare happens. And I think those events are profoundly formative at whatever age we are, wherever we are in the journey. And I think for me, my 40th birthday became a bit of a midlife crisis where you get so far down your way, and realize, wait, do I know what any of this is all really about? What do I do with my own brokenness? What do I do with all the ways I feel like I failed and I've broken people around me? And there were times still, Shane, honestly, I still wanted to go back to my teenage years and the temptation to go ahead and cut. And so I ended up picking up a pen, same pen that I'd written down 1,000 ways, all those blessings, counting all the ways God loved me, and picking up that pen and taking it and writing a cross on my wrist right over where I had the scars from all that brokenness and cutting, and taking the pain of one formative event and choosing to say, I want the shape and form of my life to be cruciform. I want it to have the shape of the cross. And in my own brokenness, taking my wounds and pressing them up against the wounds of Christ on the cross. And what does it mean to live cruciform? What does it mean to let the shape of your days be shaped like a cross? That, yes, there's that vertical beam that comes down from the cross, and all of His grace and His gifts come down, and my gratitude rises. And then what does it mean to live broken and given that horizontal beam stretched out into the world? And I think, we look at that cross and we see it as, yes, transformational, and also realizing that it's so paradoxical. It's such a symbol of weakness. It's such a symbol of brokenness, yet it is the symbol of resurrection and abundant life. So I think for me, looking at that formative event, my first memory, Amy being killed in front of Mom and I, now looking at, I want the most formative event in my life coming before that cross and becoming cruciform and allowing the cross to really shape and form my days has been profound for me, and realizing that living cruciform, living in the shape of cross, is really a beckoning into communion, which I think is what we're all so desperate for. We feel abandoned like Christ on that cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? In the midst of whatever we're facing, it can feel like abandonment. If we live paradoxically and go ahead and live broken and given, we can find a deeper communion if we look not so much inward, but seeing outward, and how can I be broken and given outward into the broken-hearted world.
Starting this week and then for the next 3 weeks, I'll be talking about InterVarsity Press's new book, Soul Bear. That's Soul Bear, B-A-R-E. It's a compilation book. Each chapter is written by a new author. People like Emily P. Freeman, Trillia Newbell, Seth Haynes, and my friend Sarah Bessie, who I sat down with to talk a little bit about her chapter in the book. So in your contribution to the book, you tell a short, oh-so-sweet story about getting a letter from a friend and going on a walk with your daughter. I wonder if you would just read the second to last paragraph of your chapter, because I loved it so much.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. The paragraph is, perhaps I will be a person instead of a ministry. Perhaps I will remember we are people, not ministry opportunities to be mass-produced, and we need relationship with Christ, not a program, to be fully alive. Perhaps I will write my own self a letter to remind me all over again. Remember, you are happier here, and God is enough.
That's worth the price of the book right there.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, with paragraphs like that, how could you not buy this book? And right now, you can buy it for 30% off. Just go to ivpress.com/dropout. It seems so universal for Christians when they are hurting that the temptation is first to self-medicate, and yours, yours is through cutting, but most of the time, it's for people, it's also some sort of self-harm. It's something that, and even if it's just something inside people's head, if it's just thinking negatively or something like that. Like, it's so, it seems so attractive to go that route rather than to turn to God, to just start praying or talk to someone, have fellowship with somebody. And it seems like the self-harm route provides a more immediate relief, but obviously is more damaging in the long run. Whereas turning to God, it doesn't always feel like the immediate relief, but is more healing over time.
I think that's exactly it. I think as Christians, lots of times we self-medicate. We self-medicate, and we're really hesitant to just feel our feelings. We judge our feelings. We evaluate our feelings. We weigh our feelings, as opposed to saying, no, I'm allowed to feel all of these feelings. Feelings are meant to be felt, and emotion actually literally means to be moved. We feel the feelings and then allow those feelings to move us deeper into the presence of God in a really authentic way. And instead of self-medicating, can we go ahead and there are times we need to go ahead. Medication can be a grace and a gift from the Lord.
Yes.
There's other times that we can go ahead and say, how can I be honest and real in my lament with the Lord, and lay this all down in front of Him and say, Lord, can I take my brokenness and lean it up against your brokenness, and can you heal me in a way that is really unexpected and counterintuitive? Oftentimes, as a family, we read Isaiah 53, and he says, if you spend your life on behalf of those who are oppressed or those who are in need, if you are broken and given, then your light will rise as the noonday. I think if it's possible in the midst of feeling broken, of wanting to self-medicate, as opposed to looking inward and becoming fixated on our interior work, sometimes the way to go ahead and bring deep healing on the inside is to reach our hand out to those on the outside, and to live broken and given to one other person, to be the gift and give it forward today to one other person. And in doing so, we find our own meaningfulness, we find abundance, we find our own purpose in a way that heals some of our broken places.
You run aside something that you mentioned that I think is really important for me to say, is that I think that turning to God in prayer and all those things are obviously always good things, but not a substitute for medications prescribed by doctors and those wonderful things that are
there are times and places that those are absolute miracles from the Lord.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and not even that they themselves are from God when they're in the right
completely
right
a gift and a grace to save us, literally. So there are times and places I just think, can I go ahead? I think the dare to step into the broken and say, I'm not going to be afraid of broken things because Christ can redeem everything. Yeah. So I can sit with the brokenness, and if the brokenness needs actual medication, does the brokenness need me to go ahead and break away from some self-harming? Does it need me to go ahead and break lies? Does it need me to go ahead and break idols that I have in my life? I think it really comes down to, if I'm going to live fearless of brokenness, how do How do I sit with brokenness and say, I'm not afraid of this brokenness because Christ is redeeming everything, resurrection, new life, seeds grow out of broken places, broken earth, broken ground, broken sky.
I think we have this idea that when for whatever happens, some situation leaves us broken, that we think that we've got to be put back together, we've got to be fixed so that we can, be a better Christian, get on with, living a good Christian life. And one of the big themes of the book is that it is that brokenness that allows you to do those things. Like that's how we have compassion. That's how we love our neighbor, is through the brokenness inside of us.
It is. I think so often the world around us, we're looking for, what is the answer to suffering in the world? Why does God let these things happen? And I think, we say we want an explanation from God. I think ultimately what we really want is an experience with God. Answers can be cold, but his arms can be warm. And I think we get to be the arms and feet and hands of Christ as we live with compassion. Compassion actually literally meaning co-suffering. How can I be broken and given into someone else's suffering? How can I come alongside and walk with someone in suffering? I talk about in a broken way that witness breaks brokenness, and I think that ministry of presence, how we can stand with each other. God says he is Emmanuel, God with us. I think if we can look around at brokenness around us, not turn away from it, not be afraid of it, not say I'm trying to climb some ladder to some American dream, but I actually want to be broken tall ladders and go down lower to the least and the lonely and the lost. How do I look for brokenness and say, I want to step into that brokenness and be with someone in that brokenness? Breaks the brokenness, and that if I can live with them, there's bad brokenness in the world that impedes and is a detriment to human flourishing, but then there's good brokenness that is the brokenness of humility, the brokenness of vulnerability, the brokenness of generosity, of being broken and given. That good brokenness breaks the bad brokenness in the world. So there's I think we shouldn't trust leaders who don't limp, leaders who've never experienced brokenness, because they don't have the kind of compassion to be a wounded healer.
I love that line. I don't think we should trust leaders that don't limp. That's beautiful.
I don't think we should trust leaders that don't limp. They haven't experienced brokenness. They don't know what it's like to feel deep pain, to know deep suffering, to live wounded.
I think in Christianity we have for so long preached this message that following Christ looks like being victorious in everything, right? Like triumphant and victorious. And for so many of us, it doesn't ring true, and so maybe we think we're doing it wrong because for us, it looks like being broken.
I could weep at this. There are so many people that resonate exactly with what you're saying, Shane.
I wonder, too, the problem is that when we live into that lie of being that following Christ looks like being victorious, is that when tragedy happens or life happens, then we have no place for it because we're suddenly like knocked off our war horse.
I think ultimately living the Christian life is living a victorious life, but victory doesn't look the way we would define victory.
Right.
I think victory looks cruciform. It looks like a cross. It looks broken and given. I think we look at the cross now and wear it on as a chain around like necklaces, and it looks like, look at this great sign of victory, but it's such a broken sign. And I think if we can realize that living the Christian life is a life of victory that is shaped cruciform, that's shaped broken and given, that will look wounded, that will look like it's limping, that will reap great abundance and great yield in the world. I think the church, too often, I have been tempted to present, we wear masks, we act like we have it all together, quote unquote victorious, but if we keep presenting as if we have it all together, the world begins to think that Jesus came for people who have it all together and not for broken people. I think if we can be honest about our own brokenness and say that this is who I really am, then the cross is seen, Christ is seen as all the strength. He gets all the glory. He is seen as the the actual healer in the midst of brokenness. So I think victory needs to be entirely redefined as cruciform.
I wonder how having that view of brokenness and of suffering, what difference it makes in the way that we think about the future. And I just know so many who have so much anxiety about the future, and maybe it's a societal thing. We're in a political year here in the United States, and people have anxiety about it. But also on a smaller level, people just worried about their family getting sick or being in some kind of accident, and just living in that constant fear and never experiencing anything we would call abundant life.
I think 1,000 Gifts in the Broken Way, 1,000 Gifts comes to that, what I think is really the center point, the axis of a life of faith, that Last Supper. Jesus takes the bread and he gives thanks. He gives thanks for the hardest thing, the most incomprehensible thing. And I can come back and go, Christ can give thanks in that. I can give thanks in anything, can't I? And those aren't cheap words. Those aren't trite words. That can be profoundly painful. And then Broken Way, looking at, well, what does Jesus do with what he's been given? He breaks and he gives it away. I think those two right there embody what a life of faith looks like. An authentic life of faith is a life of gratitude in the midst of profoundly hard things that I don't understand. And a life of givenness, that Jesus takes that bread and he gives it. That givenness really meaning surrender. So when I look at the future and I have concerns, I have worries, I have fears, those fears break away if I can live in a posture of gratitude and givenness, that he will give me what I need, that I can be grateful for no matter what the future holds. And I can live in a state of givenness, a state of surrender, completely given to him regardless of what comes, completely given out into the world with whatever comes. I don't know, when we look at the future, we think, oh, difficult things are coming, painful things are coming. Why does God allow these things to happen? And I think we may not know the answers to pain and suffering in the world, but we know that there must be a very good reason for the difficult things, because God himself is willing to endure those things. He cries with us. Yeah. When our hearts break, his heart breaks in two. So again, I believe that witness breaks brokenness, that Christ is with us in the painful things and the incomprehensible, heartbreaking things. I think if we look out into the future, and on paper, there's a lot of reasons to be afraid of the future, and personally and globally, there is something profoundly freeing. Think of, I do not need to be afraid of broken things. Christ is redeeming everything. He is going to make all things new. What is broken is actually it's like broken soil. It's a seed bed. That seed, if I didn't know any better, if I didn't understand what life looked like, what growth looked like, I'd look at a seed being crushed and see destruction, as opposed to that seed is breaking so that it can bring forth new life. And I think there's no growth without change. There is no change without something being broken. Molds have to be broken. Old ways, old boxes, old ways of thinking have to be broken. If we want change, if we want growth, we have to step up in courage and allow the brokenness to come so we can step into those new places. So I think if we can face the future without fear of brokenness, and even, ironically, for me, I've realized I don't even have to be afraid of being afraid. Mm. If I can go ahead and say, I don't even have to be afraid of being afraid, because Christ is with me, even as I feel these feelings, and allow these feelings to move me closer to him.
I think that the idea of healing is a biblical concept, and I wonder where you think that fits into with living with brokenness, because I think someone could hear the conversation we're having and think that healing is moot if we are living, if the idea is to live with a broken heart. Then what place does healing have in our life?
I wonder, Shane, if we see sometimes that a broken heart is a healed heart. The brokenness itself brings deep healing, because if we live with a broken heart, it's a sign that we've loved well, that we loved enough that our heart was actually broken. The tears are actually signs of an indication, a manifestation of how deeply we have loved, that those tears are watering deep healing and growth in our life. I think sometimes our understanding of what healing is and what the victory is, if we can flip them upside down and see them through the cross, if we can see them through a cruciform lens, I think healing may come from all the broken pieces of our hearts, that they're being made into mosaic of grace. I think we look at the cross and we see, well, was that healing? Was that a sign of healing, that Christ was crucified? That looks like a sign of death. That looks like devastation. And yet out of that comes resurrection. So I think if we can look at the broken places in our life and say, there is healing that's beginning here, redemption that is happening here, there is abundant growth that's coming out of ashes. The ashes isn't the end of any of God's stories. Abundance is. And trust that out of ashes, there are seeds that are being crushed and broken apart to grow something that really is going to be beautiful and beyond our understanding.
The last thing I wanted to ask you was about a story that you tell in the book about your friend Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about her story, and then what she taught you?
And keep myself together, right?
Yeah, good luck.
That one could be hard, Shane. Elizabeth, it's hard to even use the word was. Elizabeth was the mom of 5 children. She had stage 4 cancer. She herself was general practitioner, a doctor. She had her youngest son, George, was born with Down syndrome. Her daughter, Emily, legally blind. Their son, Danny, had a mitochondrial disorder, and sometimes braces, sometimes a wheelchair with an oxygen tank. Elizabeth had a really difficult but beautiful life. She loved so well. She loved me so well and taught me through those final stages of cancer what prayer looked like. She would knit prayer socks, 19,000 stitches in a pair of socks, 19,000 prayers. Wow. And would send me prayer socks that I could walk on his promises and know that I had been prayed for. Sent me gift packages. I would fly places to speak, and I would arrive somewhere, and there would be a gift package from Elizabeth. She showed me that in the midst of her own brokenness, that there was deep fulfillment, deep meaningfulness in being broken and giving her life away. She told me that she did not have a bucket list of all the things that she wanted to accomplish and do in her life, that she had her purpose and her plan was to have an empty bucket at the end of her life, that she had poured it right out, that she had given it all. Elizabeth taught me that we love as well as we are willing to be inconvenienced. I think oftentimes we are hands of the clock, feel like a drill sergeant. We have so much to do, so much we need to accomplish. And Elizabeth taught me that every interruption is actually a manifestation of Christ. And I could see every time I was inconvenienced, it was an invitation to love, that love is actually about sacrifice. Love is actually about being inconvenienced. And could I set aside my to-do lists and see them as to-love lists, that what I wanted to do every day was to be interrupted, to be inconvenienced, and that was living a life of love. And relationship really is the only reality. When we get to our funerals, the only thing that's going to be there are the relationships, the people that we have chosen to be inconvenienced for. Love is really about just choosing whom we are willing to suffer for.
That was a beautiful scene at the end of the story in the book that you tell about everyone being at the funeral and their prayer socks.
Now you're going to get me, Shane.
Sorry, yeah. I'm not going for that, but yeah, it was a beautiful story and such a sweet friendship.
Yeah, I think it's hard for me to still think that Elizabeth is gone, and I think it's because she loved so well that her love has ramifications and ripple effects. Love goes on forever and ever and ever. It never ends, and Elizabeth's love continues to carry me. And I think, if we're willing to be inconvenienced, if we're willing to live lives that are sacrificial, that are willing to be, where our days are willing, we lay them out and say, hey, Lord, make my life cruciform. Let me go ahead and literally have my life shaped like a cross. Our lives don't end. We die to ourselves every day so that we're not afraid of death, and the love goes on forever and ever.
There's so many people out there who are living with a broken heart, and to a degree, we all are.
We all are.
And I think this is just such a beautiful gift. Thanks for really, really pouring yourself out in this book, and thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for grace, and just thank you for taking a dare to step into the brokenness and believe that, we don't have to be afraid of the brokenness. Christ is redeeming everything.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of Seminary Dropout. Remember, you can find all the show notes for this show and all shows at ShaneBlackshear.com. Oh, and hey, have you ever thought about starting your very own podcast? I bet you have. And I think you should do it. In fact, I've created a course just for you to teach you everything that I've learned over the last couple of years producing Seminary Dropout. So if you're interested in podcasting and want to learn how, go check out my course. You can go there by typing in podcastingforeveryone.org. And you can get a special discount by typing in the discount code Seminary Dropout, all one word. That'll give you 25% off. So go check it out. If you have any questions, let me know. Okay. Thanks to those that left ratings and reviews on iTunes this week. Remember, that keeps the show front and center. Also, remember, you can find me on Twitter at beardonabike. That's at beardonabike. Also, I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/ShaneBlackshear123. And remember that Seminary Dropout is listener supported. You can visit supportseminarydropout.com and press Become a Patron. Remember, this music you're listening to right now is by D.L. Rossi. You can find him online on iTunes and at dlrossi.com. All right, thanks again for joining me for another episode of Seminary Dropout. Stay tuned for next week's episode. Love you. Take care.
But there's still hope for me. This great